So we're still in January, so we're still on step one. You can never imagine how we could beat a step to death each month, but we do it, and we seem to find new material to talk about each time. So for those of you that are new and maybe aren't necessarily in our program yet, or in the 12-step program, in this church we often talk about alcohol, and we read the steps and we read the promises and whatnot. Alcohol comes up, but I want you to know that when you talk about, or when we talk about, or you hear the word alcohol, that it includes drugs, sex, food, work, porn, telephones, social media, and every other kind of addiction that we are all subject to being involved in. So when we say the word alcohol, if alcohol really isn't your drug of choice, just substitute what is in there. So again, the first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. We talked about powerlessness a couple of weeks ago. We have to understand that addiction robs much of our power of choice by hijacking our brain. Over and over until we become powerless over our addiction, and that leads to a very unmanageable life. That being said, we do have the ability to make some choices and some decisions, and we must acknowledge our powerlessness and look at what's going on and what's going wrong in our lives. This step connects us to memories. Imagine that. And those memories will show us how our addiction has stolen many parts of our life and has really hijacked us and hijacked where we're going. The memories help us to realize how cunning and how baffling and how powerful our addictions are. Despite the harmful consequences, and despite us knowing what those harmful consequences will be, we choose, or maybe I should say we chose, to do nothing about it. The message today is about the turbulence in our lives. This includes all areas of our lives and all stages of our life. It includes recovery, of course, but also our spiritual life. The one big thing I hear from many people as to why they don't like AA, they say, "Oh, I just can't stand that God thing. I just don't relate to the God thing." And I hear many people tell me how they're recovering Catholics, or they're recovering Anglicans, or recovering Protestants, and they just don't want to get involved in that God thing. I hear that sometimes more than I hear I'm a recovering addict or alcoholic. The fact that people have been beat up in traditional churches is not new. We talk about that often here. It's evident, and people are leaving some of those traditional churches in droves. That doesn't mean that they have lost their faith, or that they don't believe in a higher power or don't believe in God. The traditional old-type services just aren't doing it for them anymore. They're not offering them what they're looking for. So we'd like to welcome you to the recovery service, where I hope that we can give you what you're looking for. Recovery, and with a little work, the opportunity to have the spiritual experience we talk about in step 12. I realize that's a long ways away, but to have that experience, it has to start at step one. We have to start doing the work in step one. Our founder, Bill W., deemed it absolutely essential that to have full recovery, we need to have the experience, this is a bit difficult to say, the experience of the spiritual experience. He deemed that we needed to have that, or we weren't going to recover fully. So often recovery is only taken so far. We'll quit drinking, and we are successful, things are going pretty good, so we're not using, we're not drinking, but we still retain the defects of character that are exhibited by alcoholics and addicts. You know the ones, the difficult to live with, the dry drunks that are out there. And you see a few of them in the rooms. They're the ones that don't drink and they don't drug anymore, but they drive the rest of us to want to drink. You know the ones, yeah? They're all or nothing thinking that distorts and destroys most calm and clear communications. There were studies done by a psychologist a number of years ago that found that people who didn't work a program retained their same childish, emotionally sensitive, and grandiose attitudes. So this was done a number of years ago. So that just kind of confirmed the dry drunk syndrome. We need to work a program to change our lives. Now, these same things could be said for others in society that don't choose to do any work on themselves at all, I suppose. They have never been touched at the unconscious level where all of the real motivation, all the real hurts, the unforgiveness, the anger, the wounds, and the illusions are stored way down here in the unconscious, or up here in the unconscious level, hiding, and often those things are fully operative. When something is said, they get triggered and we go back into that old behaviors. They never went to the inner room that the Creator invites us to where things are hidden and things are secret. In Matthew 6, verse 6, it says, "But when you pray, go away by yourself, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father secretly. Then your Father, who knows all secrets, will reward you." I think the Scripture is telling us to pray. Talk to your higher power. Talk to your Creator as if He's your best friend. Share your secrets with Him. He knows them anyway. Share them with Him and talk to Him about them. But you don't have to make a public spectacle out of doing that. Step one is admitting that we have a problem. It's surrendering, and it's asking for help. If we do this and ask God for help, it says in Matthew 6, verse 6, He will reward you. That means He will give you the help that's required. Many of us here can attest to that we've done that. We've gotten on our knees, we've asked for help, and we've got that help so that we can move forward in our recovery. We admitted powerlessness, and suddenly we're given the power to move forward. It's a strange, strange concept, and it's one that's hard to grasp onto. By admitting that we're powerless, we suddenly get the power to do something. Let's take a look at the ways I believe that our Creator, Jesus, and the 12 steps of AA are saying the same things, but with different words. We suffer to get well. We surrender to win. We die to live. And we give it away to keep it. All mature spirituality is about letting go of everything. The first step is probably the hardest, the most denied, and the most avoided. When this happens, the whole process just really never takes off. I want you to think back to your first exposure to AA or the 12 steps. Did you jump right in? Or did you make some excuses and have some reasons why maybe the program wasn't quite for you? You know, I got to the parking lot and it just didn't feel right. I went in and I looked and I wasn't like the rest of the people in there. I'm a different kind of addict. I'm a different kind of alcoholic. And the program works for everybody else, but I'm sure it wouldn't work for me. You know the excuses. We've all made them, okay? No one likes to die to who they think they are. That's a strange statement, but no one likes to die to who they think they are. Their fake self, you know the one. Remember the masks that you used to wear? I used to wear one all the time that made me feel good when I went out in the community. The false self is all that they have. We have to change that, but nobody wants to lose it. A German mystic philosopher, Meister Eckhart, said, "The spiritual life has much more to do with subtraction than it does with addition." We need to take many things away. We need to arrest our ego and our self-centeredness and our selfishness, and we need to become humble. And again, here it is, we have to ask for help. Remember, our egos hate to change more than anything else in the world. Ego, when the present situation isn't working or is getting really, really horrible, will not allow us to see it, and it resists change. Possibly one way to have our ego see the need for change is looking honestly at our lives and the unmanageability in those lives. The scripture I chose this week was Psalm 38, verses 3 to 14. I'm not going to read it, I'm not going to get into it all, but it talks about the turmoil in our minds and our body over our sinful nature, over the things that we're doing wrong, the things that we're sinning about. We are seen in that scripture as decaying and having a loathsome disease, and we do have a pretty bad disease as I see it. Here we see the psalmist in great pain and misery because of sin in his life. As addicts, we can identify with those types of feelings and conditions that have come from our sin, from our defects of character, from our wrongdoings. No sane person I'm going to repeat that. No sane person would want to find themselves in this state of corruption and decay, but we do. But because of the sin in our addictive behaviors and our inability to say no to those behaviors, we find ourselves feeling bad in our body, feeling bad in our heart, our minds, and most certainly in our soul. We have many areas of consequence. We feel shame, we feel guilt for what we have done and what we sometimes continue to do and can't say no to. In our hearts, there is hurt and there's sadness. In relationship, there's turning away of our lovers, our girlfriends, our boyfriends, our families, our children. They're all turned away in our addiction. In society, we are the outcasts. The people talk about deceitfully, and they talk about things that we do. There is a hint in this psalm also to the solution in laying it before God. There are, what will be covered in the following steps of the program, some solutions to this problem. How to turn it over to God and begin making things right before God and before your fellows. But first, we have to admit that we need help and that we're powerless to overcome the addiction in our own strength. So how do we know or recognize that our lives are becoming unmanageable, especially in the early stages? I think for everyone, this is a bit different. I think the obvious is true in many cases. The loss of a job is pretty unmanageable. The loss of relationships, the loss of freedom, going back to jail or going to jail, being tied up in the court system, having family members upset and mad at you all the time. So here are 12 signs that our lives are maybe becoming unmanageable. And I borrowed them from a sister program. You might recognize some of the language here, but addiction is addiction. It doesn't matter. And these may apply even if you're sober. Number one, I'm late for meetings or other commitments, or I don't show up at all because I'm way too busy. How many times do we hear that? I lash out in anger at loved ones and even total strangers without control or remorse. I've lost a job or hate my job because of my behavior. I remain distant from those around me because I'm constantly thinking about my next fix or why I'm such a victim. I can't have healthy intimacy with my wife because of the fantasies playing out in my mind. I've lost a marriage, or I limp along in one that I'm currently in. I'm living a constant fear that my actions will be discovered, while at the same time getting high from the rush of acting out. I can't complete tasks or meet responsibilities because they conflict with my need to feed my addiction. I have lost friends or have been unable to make friends. I've avoided relationships and jobs because I was afraid. I've wrecked my career, my home, my life. I've been hospitalized for depression or attempted suicide because addiction is destroying my physical, my emotional, and my spiritual being. How many of these sound familiar to you? Behaviors that we used to do, maybe behaviors that we still do. Life driven by addiction brings in confusion, it brings in chaos, it brings in misery, and ultimately disaster. How often have we asked God's help while continuing in the same sick behaviors and disregarding our consciences? Getting and staying sober is the first step in the recovery process. I have to stop and stay stopped. I suppose, and the old timers might say, put the plug in the jug and just don't drink. That's it. I have to stop and stay stopped. But that is just the beginning. Living in recovery from addiction is a day-to-day, moment-to-moment practice for the rest of our lives. One thing I've realized in my own recovery process is that after a bit of sobriety, or what I may think is recovery, I think all is well. I get comfortable. I get complacent. And then I think I have it all figured out. And then, just like that, the addictive behaviors all start to roll back in. I quickly anger at the children and people around me. I get defensive if my wife questions the meetings I'm going to or the step work I'm doing. I put off doing step work because I have more important things to do. I make up excuses on why I don't need to go to meetings this week and why I can't get to them. Calling my sponsor or others in the group takes too much time, and they're probably too busy to talk to me anyway. And the list of excuses, as we talked about before, goes on and on. The statement that was made from a member of a 12-step group that I read the other day online, and it made so much sense to me, I just want to read it to you. And it says this: "Now, with a little bit of recovery under my belt, I'm coming to realize that the thought that I am competent on my own, that I can rely on my own resources to manage my life, is a lie. I need God's help, and I need the advice and support of my recovery fellowship to navigate the twists and the turns that life presents to me. It was pride that caused me to believe that I could manage my own life without assistance. I now consider it a sign of strength when I have the courage to ask for help." I just want to read that one again. I now consider it a sign of strength that I have the courage to ask for help. How can this be a good reminder to us that recovery is a lifelong pursuit? I want to just remind you the song that we played, the video that we played a couple of weeks ago, "He is a Chain Breaker." And that song for me hits a nail right on the head. It's time to take action, as the song says. If you've got pain, he's the pain taker. It's telling us what to do. We need to take the first step. We need to ask for help. We need to get out of denial and realize that we have a problem, and we have to ask for help to get to do the work. Working the steps will guarantee you, will calm the turbulence in your life. The unmanageability will disappear. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I want you to have a great week. I want to challenge you and give you a little bit of homework this week if you'll care to do it. And some of you will have the opportunity to check and see if you did do it. I want you to go back and review your step one. If you did a written step one, I want you to go back and read it and maybe share it with somebody. Share it with your sponsor. If you haven't done a written step one, try doing it. It is the most important step in our recovery. If we don't get step one, we won't move forward anywhere. So go back and review it. Talk about it with your sponsor.